The dipped cluster stitch in this pattern actually came about as a result of me basically just playing around with some needles. What I wanted some large eyelets or some mega sized lace holes. I also wanted a little bit of texture in it, so I wanted it to look a bit three-dimensional, and I also wanted some movement in it. So after a couple of hours swatching and kind of unraveling and re-knitting and doing lots of jotting down of notes, I came up with this stitch here, which I've just called the dipped cluster stitch, and you'll see why when I take you through it. It is tricky in as much as it takes some getting used to. I've not seen a stitch like it before that's created like this, so that's why I thought it would be really useful to do this tutorial to help you out, because as well as I hope I've written the instructions, it's always nice to see someone sitting next to you and doing it, and short of that, this is the next best thing. So I hope you find this tutorial really useful. So just to explain what's happening when you're working this stitch, you're creating a decrease at either side of this central motif. But rather than doing a yarn over which replaces those missing stitches, you're just going to keep decreasing them. And then all those stitches, the 8 stitches that get decreased, so there's 4 decreases here and 4 decreases here. So that you're losing 8 stitches over these 4 rows. Those stitches will be replaced on this row here. So don't worry about that for the moment. We'll do that as we're going through. And it's when you replace those stitches with the cluster that creates that fan shape at the top there. So as you can see, you've got movement happening here because you're just continually decreasing every row for 4 rows on both sides of this. And then suddenly you're replacing it when you work the cluster. So that's why you've got that kind of quite pronounced bit of shaping here. It's because of all the decreasing. So that should make it a little bit more clearer, because the graph is actually really difficult to try and create a graph for this, because the Stitch Mastery software that I use to create my charts actually doesn't have a motif for this stitch, because I made it up. So this is the closest I could get to it, and this was done with a combination of Stitch Mastery and Photoshop. But doing this tutorial will be much more explanatory, and you'll see exactly what's going on when we cast on and I take you through. So all I've done here is I've set up for starting the dipped cluster stitch. I've cast on 29 stitches, which is my 15 stitches plus 14. That's the amount of stitches that it's worked over in the pattern instructions. And all I've done is I've knitted 1 row. So this is the right side facing, and we're going to begin working this chart. So the written instructions, I'm going to work from the written instructions and take you through while I go. So I've got 2 extra stitches on here just to give me a garter stitch edge. So I'm going to knit my first stitch, and then I'm going to work according to the chart. So there's a knit 2 together and then a knit 5. So we're going to do just that. Knit 2 together and then knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now at this point we're here in the center of this motif, and what we want to do here is just do a yarn over twice. So that's 1, 2, and then we're going to knit 5 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at this point we want to do another decrease, but because we want it to mirror the knit 2 together this side, I've made it a slip slip knit. So that's slip 1 knitwise, slip the second one, and then take the left needle and you're going to knit both of those stitches through the back of the loop, because you want those 2 stitches here to be facing right. So we're going to knit those two together, and then we're going to purl one. So that's your 15 stitches. Those 15 stitches here are exactly what's inside the red bordered box. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to knit to the end of the row. So that's basically repeating from here again. So that's knit 2 together, then knit 5, once again we need to create the yarn over, so you just wrap the yarn once, wrap the yarn twice, and then knit 5 again. And remember to balance that knit 2 together. We're going to go slip, slip, and then knit those 2 stitches together through the back of the loop. And because this is the end of my swatch, I'm just going to knit 1. So that's row 1 done. We're now on row 2. We're here, row 2. And now because this was a slip, slip, knit, but we're now on a wrong side row. So here we'll need to work a slip, slip, purl in order that the stitches keep facing the same direction. And then we're going to come back across and we're going to purl 4. So slip, slip. So I'm slipping them knitwise again. So as you can see, they've turned from facing left to facing right. Now what I want to do is put my needle into both of them. Oops, now if I brought the yarn forward, and purl them together from that position. So if you look, they're still facing the same direction. They're still facing left. You can see that. They're still facing left. And then purl 4. 2, 3, 4. Now at this stage, you're going to hit the double loop made by the yarn over of the previous row. What you need to do is just allow that to drop from the needle. Don't worry about it, it can't run anywhere. And then work another yarn over. So 1, 2, doing another one. So just ignore that one. It will be baggy, but don't worry about it. And then purl 4, 2, 3, 4. So at this stage, you've got a hole with a slightly loose stitch on either side of it, and you've got the yarn over that you've just worked. So we just purled 4, and then what we're going to do now is purl 2 together. So if we're looking at the chart, you've purled 4, you're here, so you need to purl 2 together and then knit 1. So let's purl 2 together, knit 1. And you should begin to see the beginnings of a column of knit stitches on your wrong side row. And because we've got to the end of that repeat, we're just going to repeat it again. So that's row 2 completed. So if I turn that round, you can begin to see what's happening. Just move my yarn over. Okay. So you can see there's a hole beginning to form, and you should be able to see the column of decreases that are occurring on either side of that repeat. So there's one there and one there. You've done all that work over the first 4 rows, and at this stage, this is what it should look like. So it should look quite baggy in the center. You should notice all those yarn overs that you've dropped. I just move that out of the way. All the yarn overs that you kept dropping. Okay, so here's your yarn over from your row 4. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4. You can just see them. And it doesn't look like much now, but what we're going to do is we're going to work around those yarn over drop loops to create the cluster at the center, and that's what we're going to do next. I thought at this stage it would be much more helpful to get a close-up shot of what I'm doing to create the dipped cluster stitch. So here we are, we're about to work row 5 of the pattern, and I've just knitted my edge stitch here and the first 3 stitches of row 5. I've also got the yarn over of the previous row on the needle. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop that, and then I'm going to take the right tip of my needle and I'm going to insert it underneath that yarn over float, and the second and the third and the fourth. So if you find that the yarn over loops have got a little bit tight and you can't see quite what you're doing, just do exactly what I'm doing. Get your needle in and just give it a little poke in and pull it upwards. So now you should be able to get from front to back through your fabric, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to take the tip of the right needle in and we're going to wrap the yarn over, and then we're going to bring it through. Now keep pulling, don't have the yarn too tightly wound around your fingers. You don't want the tension to be too tight, nor do you want it to be too loose. So what I've said in the pattern is that this loop needs to be around 1.5 centimeters long. If it's too long and too baggy, the cluster is going to catch when it's worn, and you don't want that. Equally, if it's too tight, it's going to cause the fabric to really compact down and shrink down. So you want to just pull the needle upwards, let the yarn run through your fingers until you've got a loop that's about 1.5 centimeters long. Okay, so you want to bring the yarn forward and then wrap the yarn around the needle to create another yarn over. So you've got the one that was created when we pushed the needle through and the one that was created at the back. So now we're going to take the needle forward again, pull it through, same place, and pull it back up. And you want to keep all these loops about the same length. Bring the yarn forward, take it back over the needle, and you've got another stitch. So you should have at this stage 4 loops on the needle. I hold it that way, you can see it a bit better. So now we're going to do this twice more. We need 8 stitches. So we're going to bring the needle forward and poke it through the front of the knitting, through the hole, and collect the yarn. And then we're going to bring the yarn forward and over the needle to create 2 more stitches. And then one final time, needle forward, collect the yarn, yarn forward, create the stitch. So here we should have 2, 4, 6, 8 loops on the needle, which is great. It's exactly what we need. Now, having done all of that work, all that knitted 2 together and slip, slip, knit, slip, slip, purl, and all the yarn overs, you've done all the hard work. Now you just need to finish off the tops of these clusters. So I'm going to work my edge stitch. If I show you on the graph, actually, on the chart rather, you've just completed this row here. So row 5 was the cluster row, and that's where all this movement comes from. Those yarn overs and working underneath and through the knitting has created created these 8 loops. Now what we're going to do is we're almost going to put like a little garter stitch crown on top of it with the next couple of rows. So knitted my edge stitch. I'm going to purl 1, 2, and 3. So here is the point at which you're about to work those clusters. Now, in order that they aren't too baggy at the top of this, the stitches aren't too baggy at the top of this cluster, we're going to knit them, take the yarn forward, we're going to knit them through the back of the loop. So rather than knitting them that way, we're going to close them up a little bit. So you just knit 8 through the back of the loops. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My hands are hot, so the yarn's sticking to my hands. 8. Okay. At this stage, I'll actually just pull it down a little bit, just to basically tidy up the stitches. After you've knitted those through the back of the loop, you want to purl 7. So here we are. Not quite finished yet. We've still got a couple more rows to do, but you can see here that all those floats have been tidied away. They're just caught up into all this dipping, and the knitting through the back of the loop has just closed this up. Otherwise it would be quite a bit baggier than this. And you can see that framing of decreases on either side just gives it a really lovely firm angular border, and that little bit of purl there just adds another little dimension of texture, and you've got a much more pronounced zigzag in the bottom of the knitting. So I'll just knit the last couple of rows of the chart and I'll show you what it looks like. So here we are. From the chaos of all those yarn overs and all that wrapping, order's restored. We've got a really lovely plump crochet-like texture. A lot of people actually looked at this shawl when I was at yarning them recently and asked me whether it was crocheted. No, it's definitely knit. But I like the fact that it blurs the line a little bit between knit and crochet. I like creating techniques and stitches that just look a little bit different. So I hope you really enjoy knitting this. One thing I would say is a lot of people don't like knitting tension swatches because they feel like it's a waste of time. This technique is an example of when it's definitely worth taking a little bit of time just to get used to it, because it, as I said, it's not like your usual technique. There's lots of having to put your needle through the knitting, which is totally counterintuitive, but it's definitely worth trying it out. It also is a nice opportunity to try out the yarn that you've chosen for the project and get a feel for both the technique and for how the fabric is going to come up. As it's a shawl, it's not a disaster if it comes out slightly different dimensions, but you do want the fabric to have a really beautiful drape. You don't want it to be stiff, and bearing in mind how much garter stitch there is running through this design, it's nice to know, it's nice to make sure that you've got a needle size that works with not only the yarn that you're using, but also the techniques that go into this shawl. So that's the tutorial for the dipped cluster stitch. I hope you enjoy knitting your version of Marjie. Please tag me on social media. I'm at Jeanette Sloan on Instagram, and tag your shawl and your progress with #Marjie Shawl. And I'll see you next time. Bye.